Hello, I am JP Sears, and the question for you today is, how can you express your creativity while you're struggling to survive? And I pose this question to you because this question was posed to me from a viewer, David from Belgium. And I'd like to read with you. I'd like to read you his question because I think it represents a very important realm for at least half the population. The other half of the population's in denial. So let's take a look at David's specific question, if I can find it. Here we are. When you're struggling for basic survival, money to pay rent, feeding your family, I feel like I can't express myself creatively because I'm afraid that my ability to make money will be compromised. In other words, if he shifts focus from just the mundane everyday work to bringing more creativity, more risk, new projects into his life, he fears the paycheck might go away. He might lose his job, might lose clients, whatever the work is. So of course the fear is, I'll lose my house. I won't be able to feed my family. And David says, I'm full of new ideas, projects, but I don't have the budget for it. And he goes on to say, I'm frustrated and I'm angry. I've been struggling with this for 8 years. So the crescendo of the question then becomes, how do you prioritize your energy when you feel like you have to keep surviving, not living? Thank you for the question. So in other words, how can you express your creativity when you are in fact struggling to survive, to meet your basic needs, needing to prioritize your career focus on money to meet your basic needs, food, shelter, support your family? I'm glad you asked this question, David. I believe all human beings need to express creativity. I believe we all have art inside of us that needs to be expressed. In other words, we need to access our heart in order to express our art, our creativity. And if we don't do that, I would dare say something about the human spirit will die. It won't be able to stay enveloped in this human experience. It won't be able to stay incarnated. So part of our human spirit dies when we don't have the creative outlet that we need. Our heart starts to go to sleep. That already sounds like a grim story. So certainly all of you out there, and certainly you, David, I don't have your exact answers. I think my purpose is to give you some food for thought, to perhaps invoke your inner wisdom. So here's some food for thought about it. A lot of us believe that the only way for us to express our creative spirit, the art of our life, is through our job. In other words, we say, well, if I can't get paid for this, I'm not going to do it. And me getting paid to express my art, whether you're a poet, a painter, a visionary, a curious explorer, maybe your art is expressed introvertedly rather than any other outward art form. Your art is how you observe life. Whatever your version of art is, we tend to put that on the shelf and say, the distance between where I'm at and where I need to be financially in order to meet my basic needs, that is such a big distance. My art can't possibly support these needs all at once, where I am now versus where I need to be with my art. So we throw our art in the closet because we can't make a living at it all at once. And thus we have the very popular term, the starving artist. The artist will in fact starve if they put, in my opinion, the unfair burden on themselves of needing to make a living from their art, especially right away. The more we need our form of art to support us, the more of a burden we're placing on our form of art and what I would call our creative inner child. We're basically saying to our creative inner child, you need to be so good at this, you need to meet so many expectations that you get paid a bunch of money for this so you can support me, so you can support my kids, my wife. And I even need you to do good enough that you can take us on vacations. Holy crap! What's our creative inner child do? Well, of course it shuts down when we place so much expectation on it. So my invitation for all of us is to realize that our true artistic calling doesn't have to be the same thing as our job. Whatever you get paid to do, let that be a separate part of your life. Obviously, it's a very important part of your life, unless you want to go live in the jungle and eat monkey feces, or whatever jungle people eat, monkey feces and bananas. Then of course you need money to live in our modern day world. So let that be an important part of your life, if that makes sense to you, and let your art be an important part of your life. The projects you have in mind, your creative expression you have in mind, can you rechannel that same energy and begin imagining how it can be expressed, not in a realm where you put the gun to your creative inner child's head and says, make me a bunch of money at this. But you channel that same energy into a realm that says, I am doing this because it is my human spirit expressing itself. My human spirit, part of our artistic spirit, it doesn't want to be here in this life if it can't express itself. So a lot of times we take a look at some of our mentors, the great artists in our society, and we try and clone ourselves off of them. We maybe look at someone like Dave Matthews. Holy cow, one of the greatest artists that I've ever seen. And of course, he makes a heck of a great monetary living from that. So if I try and clone myself into being a version of Dave Matthews, I run the risk of constipating my life, because that means I'm not being JP Sears and you're not being David. Dave Matthews gets paid well for his art. But could you make an agreement with your creative inner child that it deserves to have his or her artistic expression, even if it doesn't get paid a penny for it? And if we actually look at even deeper into the lives of the great artists that a lot of times we try and model ourselves after, if we look deeper than the appearance that we're used to looking at, what we find is almost all of them went through either a period of time or a long period of time where they were doing their art and not getting paid for it. Dave Matthews, he was a bartender. That's how he was earning his living, getting his basic needs met. And his art, his music, that was the passion of his soul. And I love his music, so I am very thankful that he knew how to give himself permission to express his creativity, even though he didn't get paid for it. Certainly after a while, he started to get paid a little bit for it, then a little bit more, and then two of his worlds collided. His job, meaning his basic needs, and his creativity started to align. Now, the difference between where he's at now and where you and I might be now is time. From the time you begin expressing your beautiful art in this world to the time you get paid for it, oftentimes there's a lengthy period, months, years, or decades before you get paid. And let's be realistic. Some of our unique journeys have it that we are to be so passionate about our art, and it never pays our bills. I know that's not necessarily how our egos would want to choose for it to unfold, yet if that happens to be your unique journey, can you look at your creative inner child and say you are worth it anyway? Even though you don't bring home a living, you are worth it. You are worth expressing. So, for me, that helps eliminate inner conflict. The more we need something to happen in our lives, oftentimes the more it just doesn't happen. The more we don't need something to happen in our lives, oftentimes the more that thing will actually paradoxically happen. So the inner conflict that tends to happen, as we're talking about this, is allow yourself to have two separate worlds, helps eliminate the inner conflict of our inner artist looks at our inner practical, meet our basic needs part and says, hey, you are not very satisfying to me. I don't have life expression in your world. And then we try and bring our artist into and force it to be our job. And then our practical part that needs to make a living gets, I almost said pissed off, but I won't say that. I'll just say it gets angry at our inner artist because it says, you can't make a living, at least not right now, not immediately. So we start beating up the inner artist. And then the inner artist starts beating up our inner practical part even more. My life can't exist in your world, and my life can't exist in your world. So there's so much conflict. Both worlds are very important, I would dare say. And then briefly, what I would also share in my experience of this interesting adventure called my life, I feel very blessed. And for me, it is a blessing that presently in my life, I do get to earn my living expressing my art. My art happens to be the art of healing, the art of facilitation, the art of interacting, connecting with human beings emotionally, mentally, and intuitively. There was a time in my early 20s where I was, and I'll preface this by saying it took me a while before I was able to earn a living from my art. So in my early 20s, I was earning a living as a personal trainer, and I got so passionate about the more inner heartfelt healing work that I decided I'm not going to personal train anymore. I am only going to work with people at a heart level, emotional healing work. So over the course of the next 6 months, I had maybe 3 or 4 clients. So learning the lesson the hard way of earning virtually no money over the next 6 months, then I realized, okay, life, apparently you're teaching me a lesson. This counter's kind of sticky. Apparently you're teaching me a lesson that I need to keep working my day job. And you know what, my day job as a personal trainer, it was really cool in some ways, yet it in no way satisfied the inner artist that pours itself into my life through my heart. So I had to come to terms with how can I have both? So I allowed myself to do the inner heartfelt work in articles and writing in classes, even though it wasn't paying my bills. And in the journey of my life before too long. I would say it was probably another 5 or 6 years where my job as a personal trainer, working with clients via exercise, it literally dissolved. The artistic expression, the inner work, it just simply evolved and grew of its own accord. It wasn't forced by me. It was welcomed by me. And part of me says, it took you long enough. It took you 6 years longer than what I wanted, but eventually it grew. And I was very grateful to begin earning my living, gradually at first, expressing my art. And the point being, it took me a while for that to happen. So, back to some practical steps. In addition to giving ourselves permission to have both worlds, no matter how much time you do or don't have in your day, the question is, what are you willing to do to create open space for your inner artist to have life? Now, even if it's 10 minutes, if you're busy, you're a father, husband, you're working, you've got kids, responsibilities, all the basic survival stuff, is it just 10 minutes where you're alone doing your art? Or actually, can your art become a mindful meditation where you are, in fact, experiencing your art while you're doing some of the mundane things of your life? So in your regular job, how can you actually infuse some of your art? Whatever your unique art is, I don't know. That is for you to know, for you to find out. And invite it in wherever you can, if that makes a little bit of sense. Life is too short not to express the miracle of art that wants to live through us. Whether your art is externalized in kind of an extroverted form, through the spoken word, music, painting, writing, healing arts, or your art is expressed in an introverted form, where you look out at a tree and you see something much more than a tree. You introspect the art. So for me, we begin living more fully when we can invite art into our life and do our best to be patient. Perhaps have your intentions of what you'd like to have happen, yet also have the virtue of patience, pretending that life will unfold in its time rather than by our agenda, as well as having the virtue of accepting what is. What is for now. It's not necessarily what always will be. So with that said, David, thank you very much for your illuminating question. I think we've perhaps put a little bit of food for thought on the table, and I would dare say we've probably actually opened up more questions than what we've created answers, and personally, I hope that's the case. So thank you, my friend, and I look forward to talking with you guys next time.